Welcome to OLC 4.0, Term 2A. Sorry if you tuned in early, I didn't have my mic quite working right. Class 24. We're working on assignment 35, question number 4, and noun clauses. It is Monday, March 24th, and I am Jillian Percy. Here is our contact information. Any assignments can be sent in to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Please include your full name, course name, assignment number, and name. If an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which is which. If you need to take a photograph of an assignment, please send it as an attachment in your email rather than putting it directly in the body of the email. If you have a question, please email me at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. My Facebook and YouTube are both the same, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. If you're looking for previous recordings, you can check out YouTube. There is playlists for Term 1A, 1B, and we are in 2A right now because we've taught this every term. Okay. Understanding noun clauses, review how to write a news article. We are going to review Chapter 9, discuss how to write a lead, discuss how to write a body paragraph, and discuss the do's and don'ts of how to write a news article with a journalistic approach. Okay, revisiting clauses. We've talked about clauses before in this course, but I wanted to kind of go on because there's sort of a slightly higher level, and as we're nearing the end of the course, I wanted to kind of make sure people were aware of this. Of course, you remember that a clause must have a subject, which would be a noun or a pronoun, and then a verb or a predicate. So an independent clause can stand alone as a sentence by itself, like the boy went to the store. A dependent clause will not make sense on its own, but must be connected to an independent clause. So in that example, the boy went to the store after he got the money from his mom. So after he got the money from his mom is a dependent clause because it doesn't make any sense without being attached to the first part, the boy went to the store. Okay. There are also something called noun clauses. A noun clause is a special kind of dependent clause that's basically acting like a noun in the sentence. And the noun can be acting as the subject, the object, or the indirect object. So for example, if I said, whomever is interested can come on the field trip, whomever is interested is a noun clause, and that's my subject in this case. Or if I said something like, I'm going to the store and can buy whatever you want. Whatever you want is acting as a direct object to the verb buy. I will ask whoever shows up my medical questions. In this case, whoever shows up is your indirect object. They're going to ask the questions of whoever shows up. Noun clauses can also act as a prepositional object. For example, I slipped on whatever greasy thing was on the floor. Okay. Noun clauses can also act as a predicate nominative. In other words, following a state of being where it's like is, am, are, was, were, and basically in that case they rename or they describe the subject. His late excuse is that his car got stuck. The leader is whoever gets elected. Okay. Noun clauses will often start with relative pronouns or some subordinating conjunctions. So who, whom, whomever, what, whatever, when, whenever, which, whichever, where, wherever, how, however, why, whyever, that, if, or whether. Okay, so I kind of dedicated one whole class to this because I often found exercise or assignment number 35 is a long one. There's like 4 parts. And what I think happens is when people get to exercise 4, they're like, oh, I'm tired, I'm done. And they don't really want to do anymore. But I don't know if you notice, it's worth 30 marks. So it's actually a major assignment. So I wanted to kind of dedicate the whole class to how to do exercise 4. And it's kind of similar to what we did in exercise, I forget the number, 12 and 13, I believe, where we wrote a news report about chapter 1. Here, we're going to write a news report about chapter 9, but specifically focused on what happens to Gary. So there may still be some details that you have to make up, but you want to be sure that your story flows and makes sense. Remember, too, that you can only make up details that are not already mentioned in Chapter 9. So, for example, if they give you the name of a policeman, you can't just give him a whole new name because you feel like it. You could, however, make up quotations that you think characters might have said. So a lot of times in this book, people aren't talking a whole lot, so you may have to make up some quotations. Use the rubric to help guide your writing. The news article should be about a page. You are to submit a rough copy, which will be worth 10 marks, and a final copy, which will be worth 20 marks. Like I said, overall it's worth 30 marks, so please take your time. It's a major assignment. This is the checklist from assignment 12, and it's the same checklist I'm using here because it applies in both places. The headline is short and catches the reader's attention. Yes, you'll have to have a headline. A date is included in the report. An appropriate who. The what, when, where, and why are correct, and they make sense. The how demonstrates understanding of the event. The quotes are thoughtful and appropriate to the event. And the level of detail demonstrates considerable understanding of the event. This is kind of an important one. If I read your news report and I am kind of thinking, I feel like there's a lot missing, and I find myself kind of thinking, I wonder if they actually read that whole chapter. You want to make sure that your news report shows attention to detail and isn't just kind of vague, okay? Okay, I'm going to kind of go through the chapter because I found, I don't know, there was some confusion with a few people who were talking to me and they weren't sure what was happening. So I kind of wanted to kind of go over it together, basically. This is called Through the Ice. Jimmy poured a full tank of gas into his snowmobile and headed north along the west side of the lake to where he figured Gary would be coming out of the bush. Gary had told him that he would come out at the creek at the top end of Green Star Lake. Jimmy picked up speed. He felt better now that he was going somewhere. His restlessness started to fade. He felt as if he were doing something, even though he had no idea yet what it was. But what if he ran into the cops? They'd probably think he was in on it with Gary, or at least helping him. He wished he had some liquor to make himself stop worrying. He was almost at the top of the lake when he saw the first lights coming towards him, pointed at the center of the lake. There were 3 machines out there. He could see that the snowmobile being chased was traveling at a terrific speed, but the 2 trailing lights were slowly gaining. That had to be Gary in front, trying to escape from the police. Where was Wayne? Jimmy couldn't decide whether to wait where he was, about a mile from what was happening, or head to where it was taking place. He paused, then turned his Arctic cat towards the 3 machines on the lake. As he did, the snowmobiles chasing the lead machine slowed and stopped, but Gary kept going at top speed. Gary pushed his Polaris up to 105 miles an hour. He was on bare ice, where the wind had blown the snow off the middle of the lake. When he turned his head, he saw that the 2 machines chasing him had stopped. He felt a surge of relief in his chest as he decided to veer towards an island where he could drop the bag of drugs into the bush. He knew they wouldn't give up now until they caught him. He began to slow just as he noticed the ice change to a darker color. The fear hit him immediately. He backed off the gas and tried to make a sharp turn to his right to miss what he knew would be a weak spot in the ice or an open hole. The track of the machine dug into the thin ice as the sharp turn thrust him to his left, almost throwing him off the Polaris. Just as he was about to make it to safety, he felt the ice give way with a sharp crack. The machine dropped into the icy waters. Gary had gone through ice before, but in the spring, and he had always managed to get himself out on chunks of thick ice. But this was different. He dropped straight through. No big pieces of ice to climb his way out on here. The Polaris began to sink below him as he felt the icy water creep into his snowmobile suit. The only thing he could grab was an empty 5-gallon gas container that was floating beside him. He looked back at the 2 snowmobiles that had been following him and saw them sitting safely on the ice away from him. His hand and legs began to get numb. His eyes were beginning to close when he noticed a 3rd snowmobile pull up to the police. Gary shut his eyes. He knew he was going to die. They weren't going to cross thin ice to save him, Besides, he didn't think he was worth saving. At least he didn't have to kill himself now. He wanted to let go of the red plastic gas container in the 30 below temperature, but he couldn't bring himself to loosen his fierce grip on the survival box. Just let go, he kept telling himself. Just let go. It will be better. Jimmy pulled up to the other two snowmobiles. "What the H are you doing here?" yelled Fred, the band constable, as Jimmy got off his snowmobile. "What do you care?" he yelled back. "Is that Gary in the water?" "We think so. It looks like him from here, but you're not going after him on that ice. There's no way you'll get to where he is." Jimmy could see one of Gary's arms thrashing around in the water. He edged towards him to get a better look. "We shouldn't even be sitting this close to the open water," Fred said. "With all our machines in one spot like this, we could go in too." Jimmy went over to the other two machines and found a rope in a carrying box. "Jimmy, you're not going out there," the RCMP officer told him, and moved towards him. Jimmy ignored them. Before they could reach him, he took off with the rope towards his friend. When he got closer to Gary, he spread his body across the glassy surface of the ice. Arms and legs outstretched, he crawled forward. His uncle had once described how he had saved a man this way. It took Jimmy a while to reach his friend. When Jimmy was only a few meters from Gary, he could see his face going in and out of the water. He knew that in a very short time, Gary's head would go down and not come up. A wolf howled across the lake. Jimmy closed his eyes and slid forward. As he reached the edge of the ice, Gary's head disappeared into the black water. Jimmy grabbed the top of the hood of Gary's snowmobile suit and yanked it up. Gary's white face and blue lips came up, but his eyes didn't open. Then he spoke. "I can't, Jimmy. Don't want to. Sleepy. Forget it." Jimmy reached over the edge of the ice with his other hand and smacked the side of Gary's face. Gary's eyes opened as he grabbed Jimmy's arms. "Whoa, Gary," Jimmy yelled. "Hold on." "I can't. Let go." Jimmy ignored him. "Come on, Gary, come on. Give it a try." He hung over the edge, reached into the freezing water, and tied the rope under Gary's arms. Meanwhile, the band constable and the RCMP officer carefully moved towards him. "Grab the end of the rope," Jimmy yelled at them. They pulled the end of the rope while Jimmy yanked the back of Gary's jacket. Finally, the top half of his body was on the ice. Jimmy was exhausted now and terrified that they would both go through the ice, but it held. The three of them finally hauled Gary up on the ice and back to the snowmobiles. The RCMP officer immediately climbed on his machine and pointed to the nearest island. "I'm going to start a fire," he shouted. "Get him over there, hurry." Fred told Jimmy, "Get him out of his suit," and then yanked off his own snowmobile suit. Jimmy and the constable got the dry suit on Gary, then put him on Fred's machine. "I'll keep him in front of me. You follow in case I have trouble." Fred managed to hold Gary on the snowmobile until they got to the island. And then, so the next little part is Teresa. When Teresa heard the banging on her door, she got up to look through her bedroom window. Her cousin Debbie was standing outside. She looked at the clock. It was 6 in the morning. She quickly went to the door and opened it. "What's wrong, Debbie?" "My sister's working at the nursing station tonight, and she just phoned me." "What, Debbie?" Teresa knew it was going to be bad news. The RCMP told her to get the head nurse up and come to the satellite phone. Someone's gone through the ice up the lake, went through on their snowmobile. Teresa let out a loud moan. "Who, Debbie? Who?" Debbie stared at the ground. She was afraid to tell Teresa, because she knew how much she still cared for Jimmy. "Tell me, Debbie, tell me." "My sister's not sure what happened, but she heard Gary and Jimmy's names. I don't know for sure, Teresa. I asked my sister twice, but she's not sure. It might be both of them or one of them, but I'm pretty sure that Jimmy's up there with the RCMP and one of the band constables." "The police? Oh no," Teresa cried. "Where are they now?" "Near the middle of the lake." "And your sister said that Jimmy's there too?" "I'm pretty sure, Teresa." Teresa heard her mother get up. This was all too much. "What's happening? Why is he up there? He told me he wouldn't get into that stuff with Gary anymore." She was sobbing. Her mother put her arms around her. "You're not even sure if it's Jimmy who's in the water. You'll have to wait until they get back." But Teresa wasn't going to wait. She was frantic. "Debbie, can I borrow your snowmobile?" Debbie didn't know what to say, but she knew what Teresa wanted to do. "You're not going to go up there, Teresa. It's too dangerous." "I won't go out into the middle of the lake. I'll stay as close as I can to the shore." Debbie knew that she couldn't refuse her friend, who had done her lots of favors in the past. "Okay, hold on. I'll be back with it." "Can you fill it up with gas?" Debbie nodded and left. Teresa's mom tried to talk her out of going, but knew that her strong-minded daughter was determined to go. When Debbie brought the machine back, Teresa dropped her off at her house. She thought about going to see if Jimmy was at her grandmother's, but she didn't want to scare her. Instead, she went by the house, but Jimmy's Arctic cat wasn't there. Debbie's snowmobile wasn't fast, but it was only a year old, and Teresa knew it would be reliable. It was still dark enough that she would be able to see any headlights from a long distance. She went out onto the ice, hoping that she would see Jimmy again. Okay. So remember, we're going to use this to write a news article, okay? So remember that the news article format is that inverted triangle. Up top is the lead, which has the most important information. And then we have the body, which is like the next most important details. And then they have the tail, which is kind of less important information that if it got cut off the story, it would still make sense. So the lead is kind of like the first sentence or two. It should include most of the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and probably how. The body will break down the event into more details and may include quotations from major people in the news story. This is the part that's going to flesh out the lead. It's like you're doing a close-up to show all the important details. And then the tail includes details that are less important, or things that might need to be followed up later, or haven't been completed yet. Okay. Before you start writing, you want to think about audience and purpose and tone. So who is your audience? If this story were going to be printed in a local paper, such as the Sioux Bulletin or Wawatee News, who do you think would be most interested in this news? What is your purpose? Remember that generally a news story's primary purpose is to inform people about current events. Reporters are generally not supposed to give their own opinion on what they write, on what they report, although they can quote other people who give their opinion. So a reporter could say this is a disgrace, could not say this is a disgrace. But if the reporter interviewed a council member who said it, the reporter could write, "Council member Amy Trout was frustrated by the events and said, 'This is a disgrace. When will the bootlegging stop?'" So your purpose is generally to inform, right? What is an appropriate tone for a newspaper article? Should it be formal or informal, serious or casual? Hang on.
Welcome back to the third video in our 4-part Journalism 101 series. If you haven't seen the first and second episode on researching your article and interviewing sources, we've put the link in the description below. Today we're going to be talking about writing the article. Let's get straight to it. Before we start, we should caveat this whole video by saying that beyond grammar and spelling, there's not really one right way to write an article. A lot depends on the type of story you're writing, but generally you should use the inverted pyramid structure. This involves having heavier, more important news at the top and lighter, less important news at the bottom. Here's how to structure and partly how to write a news article. Start with the introduction. The first thing you should do is list the 5 W's and attempt to answer them. Who, what, where, when and why. This will form the basis of the introduction and is the best way to kick off the story. It's also the easiest and quickest way to get your ideas on the page and just get things started. It also must include the most important part of the story. Remember that good introductions avoid jargon, abbreviation and unnecessary punctuation. Second, it's the quotes and specifics. Keep the quotes in the second paragraph or later. Quotes should say something the interviewer can't say themselves. They are supposed to express an opinion of someone involved in the story or describe their feelings. They must also be interesting enough for the audience and add more to the story. Set up the quote by summarising what the quote is about to say without saying those exact words, then using it. Make sure all quotes are attributed to the speaker's full name and title unless they have chosen to remain anonymous. Avoid editorializing, so for example, don't say the victim acted in self-defense. Instead say the victim said he acted in self-defense. And always use said instead of other verbs such as cried or shouted. Quotes can be paraphrased if they're too complex or unclear to the reader. Next, make it more interesting. Be clear on the elements of the story that will interest readers. Try to imagine people you know reading the story. Think about what they would react well to, what would make them want to read on. Present stories in a way that suits the medium. Popular news is about names and faces, therefore think about the prominence of those involved. Finally, tie it up. Tying up an article in this context means briefly summarising the main ideas and leaving the reader with a lasting impression of the facts and ideas you want the article to convey. Remember not to make assumptions and definitive conclusions without knowing all the facts. Try to stick to one idea per paragraph. And remember to apply the news values of accuracy, fairness, balance, transparency and accountability throughout. Once you've written the article, now you need to edit it. We've written a full, comprehensive guide to editing a news article on our website, rationalq.com. It's a full checklist of everything you need to cover. It's all free on the website, no paywall, no email needed, nothing. Just click on the link in the description and it's all there for you. The final video of our 4-part series is coming soon. It's all about ethics in journalism.
Okay, so I liked how he kind of summarized things. So again, just like anything, we're going to be doing a little bit of like brainstorming or pre-writing, pre-planning. Think about the viewpoint. What would a reporter know? For example, something that one of the boys did while alone would probably not be known unless you think they would tell a reporter about it. So like Gary's doing some stuff before the cops have caught up to him. Unless the cops saw it, the reporter wouldn't know about it. Like I said, unless Gary tells him. Who would the reporter have talked to? So if you were a reporter and this had happened, who are the people that you would have spoken to? Who was involved? Who might have some relevant information or some interesting commentary? Who would they quote? Would some people's opinions be more important than others? And if so, whose? What part of the events do you want to focus on? And have you covered all the major events or parts of the event that a reporter would? So I would definitely jot down some notes there and think about what you want to say before you start. It's a very specific type of writing. The big thing to remember is you don't want to start at the beginning and go all the way through to the end. That's how we write a summary. But for a news report, we go out of order. We go most important first, then less important, and then of minor importance, okay? So, writing a great lead paragraph. The lead paragraph should summarize all the important points of the event. It should tell you who, what, when, where. If it's also able to cover why and how, that'd be good as well. Generally, you should be able to convey all that information in 1 or 2 sentences. So here's an example from a real traffic accident. It says, a 44-year-old woman was killed in a vehicle accident this week in Conway after one car broadsided another, authorities said Sunday. Ishia Thomas died at the scene of the accident that happened at 8 a.m. March 21st, according to Tamara Willard, Horry County Chief Deputy Coroner. And I can read these 2 sentences and go, who? Ishia Thomas. What? She died in a car accident. When? March 21st, 8 o'clock a.m. Where? Conway. So one of the things you can see is they don't put each like who or what, in a sentence by itself. We don't say, this article is about Ishia Thomas. What happened is, they kind of combine it all into one sort of mega sentence that is very dense in information, okay? So, we're going to work backwards, okay? We're going to start with the question words and think about what happened to Gary, which is kind of one of the reasons I wanted to read it, to make sure we were all on the same page and knew what it said. So first of all, who is chapter 9 mostly about? Well, it is about Gary, and Gary's who it happened to. What happened? Gary fell through the ice where on the lake I believe it's Green Star Lake. I'm going to put that. Green Star Lake. When late at night. Does it say when more specifically? I would kind of want to check that. Hang on a second. It doesn't really say like an exact time. It just kind of says generally. Now, the nursing station gets a phone call later on, so they might give a specific time, and you can certainly make one up. That would make sense. Now, we could also add how and why. Why he was trying to escape the police because he had drugs with him. How did he he hit a narrow patch and the skidoo went under. Okay, so that's the kernel of the lead paragraph. That's the kind of the basics that we want to make sure we cover. Okay. And then the middle part of the triangle is where you expand the basics. And this is kind of the how and the why, but more in detail. How did the event happen? And then you'd go into detail, like, right, so Gary, I forget where he went. Gary went to, was it Winnipeg? To pick up drugs, came back by lake to avoid the police checkpoint. Remember that? And police saw him and chased him. They stopped when the ice got thin. Gary kept going. Tried to swerve when he saw the ice change color. But he didn't make it. But fell in. He grabbed onto, what was it exactly? A survival kit? I keep mentally thinking of a toolkit for some reason. I don't know why. It was a 5-gallon gas container. Okay. So just like I'm doing, like as you are going through, if you don't remember stuff, go back and take a look. It's okay. You don't have to remember everything perfectly. Just make sure to check if you're not sure. Grabbed onto 5-gallon gas container to help him stay afloat. So that's how it all happened. And then how did he get saved? That's like a whole other slide, basically. I'm going to add another slide here. Okay. So what happened? Jimmy got a rope from the cops and went out onto the ice and grabbed him. Once he did that, the cops kind of helped him. So cops helped him once Gary was on the ice. And then there was a whole bunch of things like they changed snowmobile, like snowsuits. The cop put Gary into his dry snowmobile suit. Set a fire. Called the nursing station. So I know we said that the entire thing won't be chronological, but you can see now that I'm in the middle part, it is becoming more chronological. Now, I wouldn't put each one of these events by itself. This is just me kind of trying to get the basics down. I'm going to do the same kind of dense sentences that you want to do for your news article. Okay. Why did the event happen? What are some of the main reasons for the event? Well, there's kind of two main reasons. In a sense. One, Gary was trying to avoid the police checkpoint, which was not on the ice as far as I remember. And he kind of got careless in a sense, right? And didn't didn't stop when the ice got thin. Okay. Hang on. I think that probably covers it. Okay, so this is kind of all our brainstorming or planning. What are some of the less important details that could go at the end? This would be details about the follow-up to the event or possible future follow-up details. This section is sometimes called the tail. Any event in the tail could be eliminated, and the story should still make perfect sense. If a crucial piece of the story be missing, then it shouldn't be in the tail, but it needs to be moved up into the middle section of the article. Okay? So things like any possible charges that the police might apply, any after effects, like we don't really know for sure on what's going to happen with Gary, community response, those kinds of things. These are less important. They still might be interesting, but they're not as important. They're not crucial. Okay. So the other big thing we've talked about is that when you're doing news stories, you try to use quotes. And for one thing, it's interesting. People like to read what other people say, but also it's a way to get across opinions and ideas without the reporter saying things themselves. So who are some of the relevant or important people for the quotes? Well, Gary's involved. Jimmy's involved. The police constables, like the RCMP and the band constable, are both involved. So, I mean, if Gary was awake, who knows what he might say, right? It was dumb to keep going when I knew the ice was thin. Now, I don't know if Gary would actually say something like that, but he might. Jimmy could say something like, I wasn't going to let my friend die. I had to try to save him. Now, these are just my ideas. You can put literally whatever you like, okay? This is just an example. Because they don't use a lot of quotations in the actual story, you don't want to limit yourself to only what gets said in the story, because you won't have very much to add, basically. What are some other relevant people to use for quotes? The nurses, right? The nurse might have a commentary, or a doctor might have a commentary on his condition, like so-and-so is recovering well, right? Gary is recovering well from his fall through the ice. There is frostbite, but he will not lose any limbs, right? So that's an example. The band counselors might have something to say about the police chase, or might have something to say about the drug issue. Same thing with the RCMP or the constables, which we kind of already mentioned. Chief might say something. The other people who might say something are people like quotes, right? Teresa might say something like, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of Jimmy for saving his friend. Right? Martha or Gookum might say something as well. The teacher, Quintal, might say something. Other friends might say something. So all of these people can be used. Obviously, I'm going to use all of them. That would be too many quotes. Pick and choose. But it's fine to present 2 or 3 different quotes. And sometimes what people do is they kind of try and balance it out. So if somebody said something very negative about Gary or about Jimmy or the situation, then the reporter might choose someone else to say something very positive about the situation to try and balance the story out and make sure it doesn't seem like he's out to get somebody or like it's skewed one way. Okay. After you've completed all the brainstorming, which we've kind of worked on together a little bit, then you can write up a rough draft. Make sure it is at least a page long. That's quite a bit. For a news article, it's quite a lot. That probably means at least 4 to 6 paragraphs. Remember that for paragraphs, you need to leave a space between them or an indent. With newspapers, they often leave a physical space because people are reading it online and the space just kind of shows up more than the indent. Also, be sure to include lots of details that will help your reader understand the story and demonstrate to your teacher that you understand the chapter. Okay. I wanted to include a sample news article. It's a little bit longer, so you can kind of see how it sounds and how it goes into details. Because a lot of times I find it seems like news articles are a little bit shorter these days than they used to be. So I don't know, not everybody maybe reads the paper. So this is just kind of an example. A deadly highway collision in Canada in which 15 people have died has left 6 others fighting for life, police say. So there's your lead, right? A further 4 survivors with less serious injuries are also being treated in hospital, officials said on Friday. A bus carrying elderly people ages 58 to 88 was going to a casino when it collided with a truck on a highway in Manitoba on Thursday afternoon. It is one of the worst tragedies ever seen in the province near Winnipeg, one official said. A major response to the deadly crash on the Trans-Canada Highway near Carberry, 2 hours west of Winnipeg, involved 13 ambulances and air ambulances. Emergency vehicles were dispatched to the scene at 11:43 local time on Thursday, 17:35 BST. Authorities obtained dashcam footage from the front of a semi-trailer lorry, said Royal Canadian Mounted Police Superintendent Rob Lawson in a Friday press conference. The video indicates the bus entered the roadway when the semi-trailer lorry had the right-of-way. He prefaced his statement by saying, "They are not assigning culpability to anyone now, simply stating facts from the footage." The RCMP has received statements from passing motorists which corroborates what they know so far. Mr. Lawson also said they have spoken to the lorry driver, who is physically doing well. They have not spoken to the bus driver, who is still in hospital, he added. Manitoba experienced one of the worst tragedies this province had ever seen, said Lynette Siragosa of the hospital where many of the victims were taken. There are no words. So here they've used, one quote from an official. They don't really say who it is. Here they've used an indirect quote, right? They haven't quoted his exact words, but they've kind of relayed what he said. Same thing here. He's prefaced his statement by not assigning culpability. And then, again, here they haven't used a direct quote. They've used an indirect quote. And then down here, Lynette Siragusa. I don't know if she's a nurse or a doctor. They don't really say. You would want to make that clear. But you can see they go into quite a bit of detail about what's happened. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for from the news article that you write, okay? And I'm saying this because I've had a lot of students hand me in like 4 sentences, and I just won't even mark it if it's that short, right? There's no point. It needs to be an entire page. So please make sure to take your time and do a thorough job with this. Okay. So newspaper writing is a very specific kind of writing style. It's very different than what we do naturally in like a journal or a summary. So I just kind of want to go over some of the really important points about journalistic writing. Okay. News articles are usually written in the past tense, not the present tense. If the newspaper is reporting on it, the event has generally already happened, like Harold fell down the stairs, rather than Harold is falling down the stairs. Now, obviously, if they're discussing an upcoming event, they'll use the future tense, like the fishing derby will be held on Saturday, April 5th. But present tense would be very rare. Okay. We've talked about this before, but we're going to mention it again because it's super important. Reporters do not express opinions on the events. So here's an example of what a reporter could not say, okay? It's a terrible thing when young people get hooked on drugs. We saw the results of this on Friday night when 2 teenagers died of a meth overdose. I think that more should be done to stop people getting addicted to drugs. They're not supposed to express what they think or feel. Just report the facts. If a reporter handed that in, the editor would hand it back and make him rewrite it. However, a reporter can quote other people stating their opinion, and maybe he agrees with them, right? But it can't be his opinion. So, for example, late Friday night, 2 teenagers, Penelope Boxon and Ridge Taryn, died of a meth overdose after falling unconscious at a party and being rushed to the hospital. Band counselor Edna Stevens was vocal about her concerns. It is a terrible thing when young people get hooked on drugs. We have to do more to stop them from getting addicted. So if you want to express an opinion, make sure you quote somebody else expressing the opinion. Don't write it yourself coming from your own words. The other thing, and this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about, is reporters don't use first-person point of view. We don't say I, me, mine, myself. We don't talk as if I'm just talking to you directly. So if I was talking to a friend, I might say something like, oh, I heard about the accident on the police scanner at 9:00 p.m., and I rushed down to Bridge Street right away. The police were directing traffic around the accident, but I was able to catch a glimpse of the 2 injured people. So if I'm just talking with a friend, that's totally fine. Like the reporter could go home and say that to their partner. But in his article or her article, they have to use what's called the third person point of view. So if they're talking about a guy, they would use he, him, his, or himself. If they were talking about a girl, they would use she, her, hers, or herself, or it or itself if it was an inanimate object. And they write it as if they're sort of standing there observing, right? They don't speak for themselves at all. It's almost like they're not there. So here's an example of how that would sound. At 9:00 p.m., an accident occurred on Bridge Street. The police arrived at the scene and immediately began directing traffic around the accident. EMT personnel reported serious injuries, but no fatalities. So here, you don't hear the reporter at all. You just kind of see things through his eyes. So that's the kind of point of view that we write with for journalism or news articles. Okay, going along with this, reporters can only report what they have seen or what other people have told them. They can only report on feelings and thoughts if somebody else tells them about them. Okay, they generally don't report thoughts or feelings. So, for example, here's some stuff that the reporter couldn't say. The constable was thinking about how he was going to rescue the boy. Eddie was worried that he might die out here. Jessica was angry because she was afraid he might die too. So all those phrases, was thinking, was worried, was angry, those are things a reporter generally wouldn't discuss because unless he's psychic or God, he doesn't really know what people are thinking or feeling unless they say it. Okay? However, they can quote someone else talking about their feelings or their thoughts. So Eddie confided. Now, they said they had to say said, so maybe said. I'll change it to sound more journalistic here. Eddie said, when I stopped being able to feel my toes, I did get worried that I might die out there. Jessica, his girlfriend, echoed his sentiments. I was feeling pretty angry that he had done something so reckless because I was afraid he might die. So here is a way to get emotions into your story, is inside a quote. But it can't just be in your plain narrative, okay? Checklist. Check through. Did you use the news article format? The lead, which has the most important information. The middle, which has kind of increasing details. Did you remember to include a title? Did you include the date? Are the quotations appropriate to the story? Did you manage the viewpoint realistically? That's our third person viewpoint, not the first person. Did you avoid giving your own opinion? And then make sure you do your editing, spelling, punctuation, capitalization. Make sure you do your revising, sentence structure, word choice. paragraphing, grammar, adding details, or cleaning up longer sentences. Okay. This is the rubric from assignment number 11. Sorry, not 11, 12 and 13. And I generally use it to mark this assignment as well, because we've already used it once and it just kind of makes sense. It's the same kind of assignment, okay? First of all, we're looking at knowledge and understanding. Does the article show an understanding of the 5 W's and the how? In other words, do you show good knowledge of the event? Limited knowledge is the D level, some is the C level, considerable is the B, and thorough knowledge is level A. And then thinking and inquiry. We're looking for headline, quotes, basically just kind of an understanding of creative and critical thinking skills. Limited evidence is D, some is C, considerable is B, and excellent is an A. Communication. Here we're looking at the writing skills, sentences, proper paragraphs, grammar, all those kind of things is what I'm looking for there. And then application. This is kind of the idea that it has to be a news report. Sometimes people have written me excellent summaries that shows great knowledge of the event. It shows good sentences, good paragraphs, but it's not written in the news report format. So this part right here is where I'm specifically looking to see that you've written this assignment in the news article format. So this is the rubric that I use to give the marks. Okay, hang on. Yep, I'm pretty close to the end. Okay, remember to edit. All names and quotes needs to start with a capital letter. Also titles, like a band constable, the constable probably has a capital C, right? If a chief gets quoted, they probably have a capital C on the word chief. If a nurse gets quoted, you don't need a capital N, but her name would have a capital on her name. Doctor, DR, would have a capital for the D. All street name or place names should start with a capital letter. Remember to watch for subject-verb agreement. That's when a plural noun has a plural verb and a singular noun has a singular verb. So the cars drove over the freeway or the car drives over the freeway. Remember to use quotation marks around any exact speech. Earlier in assignment 35, we did a whole bunch of work on quotation marks. It's right in your unit. If you're not sure about how you're using the quotation marks, go back and check those rules, okay? Apostrophes are only used in 2 areas, with contractions like can't, won't, I'll, or to show possession and ownership. And also check for commonly confused words. These are still the most commonly misspelled words, 2, 2, and 2. This 2, TO, is location, TWO is the number 2, and TOO is like me also, me too. And then same thing with there, and there. EIR is for people, ownership. There with the apostrophe, RE is the contraction for they are. Oh, and hang on a sec. THERE is location. Also, make sure any compound or complex sentences have a conjunction and a comma. Do not join sentences just with comma alone. That's probably the most common grammatical mistake I'm seeing. All right, this pretty much covers everything for the news article. Are there any questions before we close for the day? No? Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to reading everybody's news articles, and I will talk to people tomorrow.